Aperture is critical when it comes to photographing wedding day details, especially wedding rings using a macro lens. So stick with us in this episode of Photography 180. We're going to run through some examples showing you different apertures and how it affects your depth of field and ultimately your sharpness throughout your images. Okay, so we have an example here with wedding rings, and they're on a sheet of paper, and this piece of paper has lines of text. So this will help us get a better idea of how those changes in aperture are giving us a bigger depth of field, and we'll see how much sharpness throughout the image we have at that particular aperture. I'm starting at f2.8 and 1/1000th of a second, ISO 1000. I'm using a LED light here, constant light through 24 Magbox Pro. It's gridded, and that's our settings. And we're gonna maintain that exposure throughout all of our changes that we make. So I'm going in manual focus mode here. And I'll be tethering wirelessly to the MacBook Pro here using Capture One, so you can get a preview of each shot as we take it. So first shot we'll see here, very razor thin depth of fields. We're getting that front surface of the rings in focus, but pretty much anything beyond that or in front of it, we're gonna get very little sharpness. It's gonna be pretty much blurred right out. So I'm gonna shift from f2.8 to f4.5, and I have to go down to 1/400th of a second in order to maintain that same exposure. I'm gonna refocus just to be sure, take another shot, and now we'll begin to see the letters above and below the rings start to get a little bit more recognizable. In addition, the rings themselves will start to get more sharpness throughout, because remember, the front surface that we're focusing on is closer to the camera than the back of the ring, so naturally at the wider apertures we're going to see not nearly as much sharpness from start to finish. But as we go from f4.5, we'll go to 7.1, and I'm at 1/160th of a second. We'll take another shot. We'll see again, we're starting to see way more detail in the back of the rings here. We have on the ring on the right hand side a 14K symbol that's starting to become more recognizable. Our next stop is f11, 1/60th of a second. Double check our focus there. Now we're really starting to see the depth throughout the detail of the rings. Of course, this is not going to be relevant if your rings are, say, standing straight up and you're only photographing a single surface. You don't have the depth that you need to include. In that case, you have more leeway to go with a wider aperture and blur out the background or whatever you have. So that kind of can be an interesting look, but you really need to be conscious. If you're shooting on an angle and you really need sharpness throughout, you have to start thinking about stopping down. So we'll go from f11 to f18, and now I'm at 1/25th of a second. So in this situation, I think you're really gonna need a tripod in order to pull this type of shot off, or something that you can lean your camera on that will help you out. Now the only other stop I can go from there in this exercise would be 22, which we can quickly do here, and that brings me to 1/15th of a second. And at f22, 1/15th of a second, we have complete sharpness. You can pretty much read all the text from the bottom to the top. Obviously, these are also situations that you need to consider how clean your sensors are as you drop down to these lower apertures of f11, f8. If you're not keeping up with your camera maintenance and cleaning your sensors, you're gonna start seeing dust spots appear in your images. So pay attention to that, make sure you're cleaning that up in post, but more importantly, go get your cameras serviced at least twice a year and to have those sensors cleaned. So hope this has been helpful. Check out next week's episode of Photography 180. I look forward to seeing you there.